Maybe we should start with a show of hands here right off the top. Who has seen the movie The Perfect Storm?
Oh, I was hoping you were going to say The Purge. I have seen it.
I've never heard of it.
It's really depressing.
It is kind of depressing. It's based on a true story, but I just looked it up for a quick recap, Danny. The film tells of the courageous men and women who risk their lives every working day, pitting their fishing boats and rescue vessels against the capricious forces of nature. It's off Boston, and it's a fishing crew, and they encounter the perfect storm. It's George Clooney, Mark Wahlberg, and some other scattered Hollywood stars.
You've seen it?
I've seen it.
Yeah,
I've seen it. Can't remember any quotes necessarily, but...
I remember the end, and it's depressing as heck.
It is. And as someone who's the world's worst surfer, and I've been tossed around by more waves than I've ridden, it is definitely evokes fears of not the way to go, out in the middle of the sea, in a big wave, in a perfect storm.
Although it is kind of funny. I'm trying to picture you surfing off the coast of Massachusetts.
No, absolutely not. I can barely handle the coast of Monterey Bay, so definitely would not be out there like that. So in this case, though, Darren, once again, you might need to explain here on Cardinals Underground. Paul Calvisi, Dani Sureck, Darren Urban. This is your brainchild here. We're going to use The Perfect Storm as a platform to do what with the Arizona Cardinals?
We're going to have 5 topics that pertain to the Cardinals, and we're just going to talk a little bit about what the perfect storm would be, in a good way, not depressing in this case. Of what the perfect storm would be to have a really good outcome for the Cardinals. Now, we're trying to keep it realistic. We're not going to sit here and say that the Cardinals are going to go 17-0. But, what kind of things would go into the perfect storm of, for instance, the first topic being Kyler Murray? What would be the perfect storm for him to have positive success this year?
A realistic ceiling of sorts.
Yes.
Because, for meteorologists, the perfect storm denotes, all these forces in nature coming together all at once.
Correct.
If everything comes together for Kyler Murray, what does that look like in 2024? I think at the very least, he's an MVP candidate because he's been there and done that.
I think that's fair.
He was there in 2021. It's not too long ago. I went back looking for something else in that game against the Packers when they were 7-0. And off the top of the broadcast, I found a YouTube clip. It was either Mike Tirico, no, it was Al Michaels, who said the 2 leading MVP candidates midway through the 2021 campaign, and it was Kyler Murray and Aaron Rodgers. So he's been there and done that.
What happened
before.
with Aaron Rodgers after 2021? I don't remember.
Well, he doesn't have time right now for any of that because he has 6 primetime games for the Jets in their first 9 weeks. Yeah. So, he just can't get preoccupied with this perfect storm stuff. But I just think in terms of Kyler Murray, I don't know if I'm ready to attach stats to it and numbers, but we've seen what it looks like, right? The eyeball test with Kyler Murray. And when the perfect storm comes together, you have a top 10 run game like you did in 2021. James Conner had a Pro Bowl season. So you're really keeping the defense guessing. You're really keeping the defense honest. Are the Cardinals going to run it? Are they going to throw it? Or is Kyler going to run it? Which is what a defensive coordinator ultimately truly fears, is can we account for the quarterback who runs a 4-3?
To me, the running part of Kyler is the most intriguing part of this conversation. If Kyler has this great game or great season and does all these things, but within this offense where we've seen them run it well with Connor or with whoever, does Kyler need to run it more often, or are we not going to see him do that and yet still see a lot of success? Will the passing numbers just jump a little bit because he's got more weapons arguably than he's ever had? I think that's the question to me.
I'd say it's twofold. Number one, will the downfield passing game return? 3 of the first 4 years, he was considered had the best downfield passing percentage or passer rating or efficiency rating through the analytics, and then that fell off in the last couple of years. Just the amount of chunk throws, the amount of on-target chunk throws that went 20-plus yards. The other thing I'll throw out there is red zone. If you're talking about perfect storm, best case scenario, ceiling, Cardinals are a top 5 red zone team. Because they have James Conner and Trey Benson, you can pound it. Because they have Trey McBride and maybe even Tip Ryman at 6'5", if he truly can catch the ball. Oh, by the way, you have Michael Wilson and Marvin Harrison Jr., 2 big receivers. And then the part of the game, and you guys heard me say this before, that I still think Kyler can maximize is his red zone running ability. We've obviously seen it in flashes, most notably in the Raiders game, week 2 a couple years ago, just the ridiculous 21-second, keep away and eventually run it into the end zone. But I just think Cardinals have the potential for a perfect storm of being a top 5 red zone team.
I think if you're not going to attach numbers to all of this, which I don't think any of us particularly love at this point in the offseason, I think those are really fair expectations of what you can expect from Kyler going into year 6 of being an MVP candidate. We've seen that from him, and now we've been told by him that he feels like this offense suits him even better, and there's more things that he likes, and he's been wanting to be under center, and that him using his legs to run, whether that's in the red zone or scrambling, whatever that might be, in an ideal world, he's not having to rely on that as much as he has in the past, and that would be more of a natural part of his game that he adds, but it would be more focused on the structure of the playbook, and I think that sets him and everybody else up for success. Red zone was an area that this team struggled in last year, so while I think that's an expectation, I think that's definitely an area to keep an eye on because it's not like they were close to reaching that last year.
Okay, so here's my question for both of you then, especially with the way you kind of phrase that, Dani. Is what we're talking about the expectation or the perfect storm? For me...
Maybe I'm confused.
Well, no, not...
Don't clip that.
I mean, I guess, for me, if you're expecting most of these things to happen, that's not best case scenario.
Okay, I see.
That's what you're expecting to happen.
Okay, then yeah, I could see best case scenario of red zone, of being top 5. Okay, I think that was on me.
This should be a new segment. Questions I wanted to ask during the press conference, but didn't have the guts, didn't have the moxie.
With Kyler, you mean?
Yeah. So
in this case?
When Kyler met the media, I wanted to ask him, have you seen all these top 10 MVP preseason listings? And did you see the one where Anthony Richardson was number 8 from
What?
CBS Sports? Anthony Richardson, who
Really?
has less than 5
Did
games
he play?
played.
Did he play like 4 games?
Yes. And he was listed number 8. And Kyler, you were like 18th. Did you happen to see that one? Because I do get the feeling Kyler sees a lot more than maybe he lets on.
He absolutely does.
So, that those are the kind of MVP rankings.
We've talked about this before,
Yes.
Paul.
Yes.
You know when all the coaches and players say they never read and see anything? They're lying. All of them.
Good. Let that hang in the air as we go. Category number 2 here in the perfect storm of Palooza, NFC West. What do you see as a best case scenario?
Take it away, Paul.
That's still realistic.
Say it.
Okay, I'm going to reverse engineer it because you want to hear it.
Yeah.
Last place Seahawks. Oh, I really enjoy saying
you're
those words.
Like saying that.
So it's most definitely realistic. In fact, I'm predicting it. I've already been on the record as saying last place Seahawks. I think with a brand new coaching staff and a brand new head coach, and they're putting in a new offense, and I don't care how good UW's offense was last year and how innovative it was. I thought Geno Smith just got worse as the season went on. They're not very good in the trenches. So all that combined, last place Seahawks.
Okay, so here's the question. Again, with this, when we're talking about perfect storm, but realistic perfect storm.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Are we talking about the Cardinals?
Perfect
winning?
storm, Seattle wins 4 games. There.
Okay. Are we talking about the Cardinals winning the division?
Not for me.
I would tend to agree with you. I think the 49ers are pretty powerful, but I think the perfect storm could see the Cardinals getting to double-digit wins and getting to the playoffs.
Being competitive with the Rams.
Yeah.
Maybe for
and
a
splitting
wild card.
with the 49ers, maybe?
On my board, the perfect storm for the Cardinals in the division is second. Is actually eclipsing the Rams, which is no small thing.
No.
Sean McVay has won 13 out of 15 against 4 different Cardinals head coaches. If there was one offseason initiative, in my opinion, it was figure out a way to beat L.A., do something about the Rams, and the inability to keep a lot of those games even close.
They did their best in the draft to replace Aaron Donald with Jared Verse and Braden Fisk and get Blake Corum, the running back. I mean, the fact that the Rams were as competitive as they were when this time last year everybody was counting them out, and now they've just continued to add some pieces. And with Sean McVay, you can never count them out and his how creative and smart and his ability to adjust on the fly. I would say yes, perfect storm would be second place in the division and eclipsing the Rams. I think it would be pretty close. Like, might come down to one of your matchups against them. That would be a perfect storm. I don't see Seattle truly being competitive in the division this year.
I think Seattle's going to be fascinating to watch because they have a new coach, so we don't really have any idea what to expect there. I mean, if the Rams were going to be bad, last year was that year, and they weren't.
No. And then their GM, Mr. Blank Them Picks, had a really good draft from all appearances.
I'm curious. I mean, the 49ers are in a great spot, but again, what happens if Brock Purdy gets hurt?
They
have Josh Dobbs.
What's the potential?
The Pastronaut.
Ish.
Yes.
What's the potential issue?
I'm still steamed that my Q&A with Josh Dobbs, where I asked him if aliens are real, if he believes in aliens, that didn't go viral. I'm still steamed about that. Someone's going to ask him that question this year. It's going to go viral, and I'm going to be even more irked.
Sorry
about that.
What's going to happen with the 49ers? I mean, are Deebo Samuel and or Brandon Ayuk going to be okay? Everything I keep reading is with Ricky Pearsall, the local kid who's now there, either Samuel or Ayuk is not going to be there next year. If Ayuk gets his extension, they're going to get rid of Deebo Samuel after this year. If Ayuk doesn't get an extension, he's the one out. Like, doesn't that kind of mess with the locker room a little?
John Lynch, by the way, you really should have gotten ahead of that curve. Talk about perfect storm and a big wave.
Yeah, no kidding.
The waiver receiver contracts that have come through the NFL.
Yep.
Wow. So that
all the more reason where everybody said, like somebody on this podcast, why wouldn't you just go try and get Justin Jefferson instead of drafting Marvin Harrison?
Who said that?
Yeah,
that sounds a little crazy. A little crazy.
Seems like a good moment for a segue to perfect storm category number 3.
Oh, that's right.
Darius Robinson.
Woo.
Okay, so Darren Urban already has him starting in a rogue tweet that went off a few weeks ago. Is that the ceiling? Is that the perfect storm? Darius Robinson, rookie, actually a starter? Or does it go beyond that? I mean, what does impact perfect storm look like?
I would say be a starter. The D-line is interesting because we know there's going to continue to be a heavy rotation. So being a starter, though, he's going to have more snaps, more impact. I would say that is the perfect storm. I don't want to put numbers on, sacks or hits or hurries or anything like that right now, especially on a rookie. So I would say being a starter would be perfect storm. And that's no easy feat when you're looking at the veterans in that room ahead of him right now. Justin Jones, Bilal Nichols, LJ Collier, Kyrie's Tonga. There's a lot of experience, a lot of big guys who were brought in, or in LJ's case, re-signed for a purpose. I think what feels a little more realistic is Robinson in that rotation, maybe more so third down packages for the first couple of games, getting his feet wet, really getting a feel for the pace of the game, and then as the season goes on, earning more snaps, having a bigger role, starting a few games, especially if, as defensive coordinator Nick Rawlis likes to say, somebody loses their shoe. So I would say right now, perfect storm would be starting.
I think the other day I was hearing some interesting things that maybe were underselling Roy Lopez as a rotation piece, which would be interesting because I don't think a lot of us have talked a lot about him. But going back to Darius Robinson, I am going to put some sack numbers on it in a perfect storm thing. I mean, I think if you could get between 5 and 6 sacks from a guy who's basically playing inside the way they play defense, I think that would be the perfect storm. Because in a lot of ways, that's one of the reasons you want Darius Robinson. You're looking for a guy that can create some pressure more or less up the middle. Maybe not nose tackle up the middle, but interior pressure, which is what has become the rage in the NFL right now, because offenses have now gotten to the point where they understand if you get off quick passes a lot, the edge rushers can't get there in time. But if you can start causing a ruckus up the middle or inside, where even if you're trying to do a rhythm pass, that all of a sudden that pocket starts collapsing a little bit, it changes a lot. And ultimately, that's what I think they want from Darius Robinson. Now, whether he can get there this year, but if we're talking perfect storm, that would be kind of nice.
Well, for example, Will Anderson Jr. went to the Pro Bowl a year ago. And you're like, wait a minute, he had 7 sacks. Really? I mean, that's a nice rookie season, but that's not Pro Bowl. Well, he had 67 pressures.
Yeah.
It's a lot, especially for a rookie, for any player. So he went to the Pro Bowl. So Darius Robinson, he's not going to have double-digit sacks. I think that would exceed perfect storm. We're trying to keep it somewhat realistic, but if he has to be double-teamed, if he's consistently in the backfield, and if you really do have a deep rotation, something you did not have most definitely last year, but if you have Justin Jones, Bilal Nichols, Darius Robinson, L.J. Collier, Dante Stills, Roy Lopez, there's 6 dudes on game day that are rotating.
God, that is such a better group than it used to be.
So,
no offense to the used to be group.
And by the way, Devin Witherspoon, who was the 5th pick overall last year, went to a Pro Bowl as a rookie. I think that exceeds any realistic expectation. Darius Robinson, even though he's a first-round pick, even though he was the second D lineman off the board after Byron Murphy the second. So, but if he's already completely buttoned up in the playbook, and that's what Justin Jones told the media, how impressive he's been mentally. So if he's not a mental error waiting to happen and the coaches trust him and they give him playing time, like Dante Stills in an interview on Arizona Sports recently said, just he can look back and be honest with himself how much he was thinking his rookie year.
Yep.
And he said, I'm reacting so much quicker, said Dante Stills, because I'm not thinking 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. So, all right, we'll see what that means exactly.
And finally, I think it's interesting that, this team has spent Darius Robinson was picked 27 overall. There's been in my past, there's been a couple of first-round picks the Cardinals have spent on defensive linemen right in that area. Robert Nkemdiche.
Dan Williams.
And Dan Williams. Dan Williams was okay.
He's
now,
all right.
he was a nose tackle.
All right.
We all know about Nkemdiche.
Yeah.
So the bar is low there, but we're talking perfect storm for this year. So
You want a quick fit story? Dan Williams?
Yes.
We're at I think it was a charity event. I think it was Bruce Arians' annual charity event. Frank Caliendo was the host and the comedian. And behind the scenes, near the green room, Fitz liked to challenge everybody. I'm going to tackle you. I'm going to try and take you down. He made the tactical mistake of trying to bull rush Dan the Can.
Oh, boy.
Who stood 350. And most of it in the lower body. And there was Larry, and he kept going, as Larry's wont to do, and kept going. And then finally Dan said, all right, you want some? And he put it in full speed ahead, bull rush mode, and he took Larry across the room near the green room, and one of the bodyguards who was there was like, God, fellas, no. And he went bananas, right? And he's running, he's trying to break it up. He wasn't doing much, even though he was an ultra big guy, when Dan Williams put it in bull rush mode. And Larry's laughing as he got thrown into a folding chair. So anyway, let's see here. Speaking of receivers, the next category, Marvin Harrison Jr. and Mike Wilson. Michael Wilson, I call him. I guess Darren's more on a first-name basis.
I was
calls
just
him Mike.
throwing it out there.
Okay.
Geez,
And receivers 1 and 2. Perfect storm. What would that look like?
Perfect storm?
What do you think, Danny?
How about some Pro Bowls?
What? Plural? Multiple? One for each?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
how about some Pro Bowls? I know that this is all projections when you're seeing what people are saying Harrison can put up, surpassing 1,000 receiving yards in his rookie year. If that's the case, and you've only got so many yards to go, right? When you consider James Conner in the backfield, Trey McBride. So let's say even as a duo, 1,500 between the two of them. Perfect storm there. Consistent threats. I'm not just talking downfield, but in the red zone.
I'll be honest. If we're talking perfect storm, I'd be disappointed with a combined 1,500 yards for those two.
Yeah, perfect storm. If Kyler throws for 4,000 yards, then they each have 1,000 in a 17-game season.
I'm not. I just think Trey McBride's going to play too big of a role in that game.
When I say, at least should clarify, when I'm saying 1,500, in my mind, I'm envisioning 1,000 for Harrison, 500 for Wilson.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think Michael Wilson could be a guy who's getting 700 to 800 yards for you, even if Marvin gets 1,000. That's where I would ballpark.
Okay, but pretty close in that sense.
That's fair.
Consistent threats downfield in the red zone, and I'm going to say Pro Bowls.
And I'm going to say Michael Wilson's got to stay healthy. I know one of the things I talked to him at the end of the season last year, and we were talking about statistical goals and everything. He goes, everybody always talks to me about statistical goals and 1,000-yard seasons or 80 catches or whatever. He goes, my big statistic is 17. I want to play 17 games in a season. He did not do that last year. He missed some games because of injury, and he knows what his reputation is, and it bugs the hell out of him. So if Michael Wilson stays healthy, I really like that duo. I love the idea of Michael Wilson as a number 2.
Yet another entry under questions we wanted to ask but didn't have the guts. When Michael Wilson says that,
do you ask any questions for real?
I want to ask Michael Wilson, but the way you play the game and the way you block with that sort of ferocity and the way you throw yourself around like a heat-seeking missile, I'd be surprised if you stayed healthy for 17 games.
That's probably fair.
You know, unless you're one of those sort of, blocking receivers who really doesn't. Unless you sort of go out there and just kind of get in someone's way. That's not what Michael Wilson does. That's how he was a starter out of camp last year because he's going in like he's a hard-hitting safety.
I posted a video. I embedded a video of James Conner's best plays of 2023 in a rushing game story that Zach Gershman wrote. And I was like, I feel like watching this video. And I'm watching this video. The number of times you see Michael Wilson making a huge block on a long Conner run on that video is over and over and over. And you can see why the running game is so good is because not only do they have a great scheme in there now, but they've got these guys that not only are, offensive linemen, but you got a receiver who's doing just what you're saying.
Okay. All right, so that brings us to the running back room and a perfect storm. First off, you got to figure out the back end of that room. It's James Conner, it is Trey Benson, and how many running backs make this final roster? And if you're going with 4, then guess what? There's one pretty prominent name on the outside looking in, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah. I don't know, and that's
There's
the
so
special
many
teams.
question marks in this room, in that position. Room.
Yeah. Like, are you keeping DJ Dallas no matter what because of special teams, and then he happens to be a running back? I think Michael Carter did a lot last year, and I think they would like him around. And Trey Benson's obviously on this team, and obviously Conner is. So then your questions are DeMercado and DJ Dallas, right?
Right. Yeah. And Michael Carter is unlike anyone else in the room.
That's the other thing.
So you're 1-2 at least at this point. So but Amari DeMercado was a guy who earned the third down.
Would you be
role
shocked if this team had 5 running backs, especially if DJ Dallas can play such good special teams?
Probably not. No, but then you're probably, at least in NFL roster building 101, it means you have 3 tight ends.
Yeah, that's probably true too. Which
I guess is, if you're going, Trey McBride and then Tip Ryman and Elijah Higgins, but you're leaving off Blake Whiteheart or Travis Vokalek. Yeah, that's possible.
Possible.
It's definitely possible.
Okay, but we are talking about the perfect storm here. So regardless of who the running backs are, what kind of year does this running back room have?
A healthy one for Conner.
Yeah.
Another player similar to Wilson, although Conner has more years in the league of needing to stay healthy. If he's going to say 1,000-yard season is the ceiling, is the floor rather, and not the ceiling, then perfect storm, 1,000-yard season.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
I think with a perfect storm, we use the Michael Jordan quote: "The ceiling is the roof," or is it the roof is the ceiling? What was the famous Michael Jordan when he went back to North Carolina?
Yeah, it's one of those.
The ceiling is the roof. I'll say the ceiling is the roof with James Conner going back to his Pro Bowl year when he had 18 touchdowns combined. I'll say that is the perfect storm for James Conner. 18 touchdowns. If he stays healthy for 17 games, knock on 4 Micah, then guess what? I don't think that's unrealistic in the run and pass game.
Okay, so if we're talking perfect storm, and in this case you guys are talking about perfect storm with Conner, does the perfect storm with Conner then automatically mean you're going to get a lot less from Trey Benson?
Yes. I would... Conner hit 1,000 yards, missing 4.5 games.
Correct.
Ideally, in a perfect storm, if Conner is healthy every game, you're able to utilize Benson in a way that is there to give Conner rest, to keep him healthy, and in doing so that doesn't affect the way you're running the ball. If you put in Michael Carter for James Conner, might have to change a little bit of how you're running the ball. Maybe same with Amari DeMercado. Perfect storm is having Trey Benson as a rookie being able to fill that similar role. They have similar size. Benson is fast. So that's the perfect storm for me, is you're still heavily relying on JC. You're using Benson as a way to sustain Connor's abilities and his strength and his health.
And by the way, if I'm Monty Ossenfort, all eyes are on Trey Benson and pass protection. Because if he is reliable, and especially with his size, he would seemingly have the ability to be good in pass pro, then guess what? Amari DiMercato might be headed for the practice squad.
Maybe.
Because that was his role a year ago.
Look, we talk all the time about when you want to improve the roster. When you improve the roster, then when you make choices about your roster at the end of camp, there's names you're like, oh, I thought he was going to be on the team. Yeah. It doesn't. They aren't.
That's when you know you're getting better as a team.
Exactly.
You know, when you cut players that it's really just gut-wrenching to cut a player, and then especially if your players that hit the cutting room floor end up on other rosters.
Yeah.
That's
because
how
you want
know.
them on the practice squad and
right.
they don't make
and they
it.
get snatched up. So
like Starling Thomas did with the Lions.
Yeah, exactly. So,
okay, well, I have one bonus thing before we wrap this up.
Here we go.
What is the perfect storm this season for Cardinals Underground and the three of us? Do we have any thoughts on that, people?
I don't know. What are the metrics by which we judge Cardinals Underground? So I'm not really sure.
Well, let's start with the baseline that Cardinals Underground exists.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Don't make everyone nervous.
Didn't realize that everyone is playing for their job. I didn't know that.
Well,
okay.
not necessarily.
Right.
More bingo wins?
Okay. I see. No. Well, okay, for me, the perfect storm would be, defy the bingo cards, prevent anyone and everyone from actually declaring bingo. That would be a good objective. I'll throw that up on the whiteboard.
I mean, Perfect Storm's got to have a perfect new nickname for somebody, right?
More props.
True. No, you're right. You're right. Well,
more props.
Well, initially, the perfect storm would come to fruition what we called for last year, the 2023 dip. Everybody now for a 2024 rip. Exactly.
You were. I was so into that in the beginning. I thought you were going to contribute.
Sorry.
So there you go.
I got mesmerized.
I fell off on there. Yeah. Started laughing.
So you're right. We do need a new marketing slogan for this year. We just
I have
don't want to rest
no doubt
on the
you will
laurels.
come up with one.
We don't want to rest on the laurels of last year, although I guess that is debatable whether that can be considered a laurel or not. Either way, the perfect storm. Dani has some viewing over this summer. She's going to go get the 2000 movie, and she's going to stream it. George Clooney, Mark Wahlberg, and company. The perfect storm.
Is she?
And that'll do it for this edition of Cardinals Underground, brought to you by Pacific Office Automation.